welcome to my 3,000 plus subscribers and anyone else who's just dropping by. I'm glad you're here. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the 311 Griffin YouTube channel. We are going to be starting up the A10C while I talk about something that's sort of related to this, but maybe not entirely. What I'm really talking about today is something that I think is really cool about DCS that we don't necessarily see or think about every day. And if you learn something in this video, what you'll learn will give you a better appreciation for DCS and what it is and how it's made, I guess, but it's not going to make you like a better pilot or better at this simulator. So what I'm talking about is the underlying systems that make DCS possible, and that's a really general term, so I'm just going to try to describe it the best I can, and I should go ahead and close my cockpit. Actually, let's not do that yet. I want to watch this guy take off. Where this came from is back when I first started thinking about this anyway, was back when the Flaming Cliffs 3 clickable cockpit mod came out. That's always cool. Always cool. And I should have turned these on already. I'm doing it the slow way apparently. So when that mod came out, I tried it. I gave it a shot, and I didn't really feel any more immersed in the sim than I was before. And the reason was because in Flaming Cliffs 3, you don't really have the underlying systems, or at least not even close to all of them compared to like a full fidelity module. So you're essentially trading a keyboard shortcut for a click or a switch shortcut. So you'll like, I don't know, I was playing it in the F-15C, but like you would flip a switch and it would be like hitting, right shift home or whatever it is to start the engines, or start one engine or the other, or whatever. You know what I mean? So you weren't going through the procedures. You were just still basically doing a shortcut. It just so happened that you were clicking a switch instead of hitting a key on your keyboard. And if you're into that, like if that helps you in the sim, then by all means go for it. That's one of the great things about this simulator, is that there's a lot of options for you doing it the way you want to do it. I'll go ahead and close that now, like I said I would. I kind of forgot. So anyway, that got me to thinking about it, because like I didn't really like the clickable cockpit mod. It didn't seem to add a lot for me. And I was wondering why, and the reason is because those underlying systems aren't really modeled. So recently, I got to talking to some software developers in a different software. It's actually for the company that I work for, and just trying to explain to them what DCS was and what makes it so cool. And what came up was the fact that whether you're making software or machines or whatever, doesn't really matter. You have to think about the way you want the thing to behave if it fails. And that includes basically some, this is oversimplification, but that basically includes some risk assessment about what is the risk of a particular thing happening, and what's the severity of the problem if it fails, right? And then you decide if you're going to mitigate at all, and if so, how are you going to mitigate? And then you do the mitigation. So here in DCS, it's that you have that, like what happens if the UI fails, or if the sim fails, if the program itself fails. But you also have these real world aircraft that they are trying to simulate in the most realistic way they possibly can. And the short of it is, if you do something that would cause the airplane's wing to fall off in the real world, for instance, then in the sim we want the wing to fall off. We want it to succeed correctly, but we also want it to fail correctly. And that's what the developers have to deal with, is how do they make it fail correctly at many different points in many different ways along the process. So just to give a quick example, one time me and Warlock were flying A-10s and we were starting them up, and I can't remember exactly. I think that might have been back in the day where you had to flip these switches on. They weren't on by default when you got in the cold and dark jet. It was either that or it was the inverter, and I got my alignment almost completely done. I had my engine spooled up, and I shut off my APU, and then I shut off the battery, and everything went dead. So I had to start my engines were up, so basically like I turned my inverter on or the generators, whichever one it was, and I just had to start my alignment over again. But it cost us 5 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes, something like that. I don't remember what it was exactly, and it was kind of frustrating. But like that's a real thing that would happen in the real jet. And when you're flying and you're trying to implement weapons or something like that, if you do the wrong thing, it's going to do the wrong thing correctly in a lot of cases. And that's essentially what's going on in the background that you never see. You don't see it. We don't have to think about it. It just makes this the most realistic combat flight simulator on the planet available to non-military personnel. I'm convinced of that. I think that that's a true statement. If you don't, like we can debate it in a friendly manner. But that's kind of what I'm getting at. And I just think that that's really cool. I hadn't thought about it a lot in the past, but I've been thinking about it more recently, and I think it's a cool thing. And if you haven't thought about it before, no worries. It doesn't mean you're a bad player or anything like that. It's just something we don't have to think about. We can take it for granted if we want, and it doesn't change your skill or your immersion or anything like that, knowing it or not knowing it. It's just something that's true. So I thought it was cool, and especially like right now, I think that there are some legitimate complaints about Eagle Dynamics and some of the way they do business and stuff. Like I don't want to be too hard on them. Like it's their business, not mine. I don't like early access. I've not made that like a secret or anything. I think and I've got reasons for that. I'm not going to necessarily talk about it here. I've been debating some people online about it recently, and and I get it. Some people like early access, and they think that it makes it so that we get modules quicker. I would argue that we would get completed modules quicker without early access, because there'd be more incentive for them to finish or nearly finish. Whereas right now, you're basically getting it. There's a term in a lot of industries called minimum viable product, and minimum viable product is it's a concept that I think applies in a lot of cases, but in some cases it doesn't, because it depends on what you've promised the consumer, and it depends on what they are expecting. And the idea of minimum viable product requires you to manage expectations a little more delicately, and that's something that Eagle Dynamics tries to do, and I think in general they do a pretty good job of that. But they're between a rock and a hard place where it doesn't really matter what they say. Like if they don't say enough, people are going to be mad, and if they say too much, people are going to be mad. So like, and I don't like the idea of minimum viable product as it is used in the software industry, and especially the video game industry these days. I think it's short-sighted, and I think it's having lasting long-term ill effects on the industry and on the consumer base. And so like right now what you're seeing with Eagle Dynamics, and it's not all bad news, but like there's a lot of people that are pretty frustrated with early access and with like Eagle Dynamics's hype train and with their delivery and stuff like that. And like I kind of get where they're coming from. I don't want to dwell on this too much, but that's sort of what I'm talking about when I say that there are some valid complaints. So I'm going to leave it at this. I'm going to just say there's a couple points I want to make, and then I'll shut up. First, I can't get over how there's no sound when I spool those up. So first, while there are some valid complaints, I would suggest that you always just point out things that are legitimate concerns in the most respectful and concise way possible when you're reporting them to Eagle Dynamics. It doesn't really do any good for anybody to go around the internet just like hating on Eagle Dynamics. So like just voice those concerns in the most respectful and calm way possible. And then also kind of give Eagle Dynamics some slack here and there, because like while there are valid complaints, there are also a lot of areas where we have a really good sim that is really, really awesome. And like things like what I just talked about are something that we have access to in DCS, and I think we've all had a lot of fun in DCS, and it's a pretty cool sim. Like I said, it's the most accurate and immersive combat flight simulator available to non-military personnel, and it allows a lot of personal customization in how you fly it and how you access it and the hardware you put into it and stuff like that. So Eagle Dynamics has done a fantastic job with a lot of things. There's a few things that I want them to correct and work on, and I think that that's fair of any company. And so like if you give them that negative feedback in a respectful and clear and direct way, like that's probably a good thing. I will always say that feedback is good and negative feedback is the best. Now I will say this: I said 2 points, but I'm going to say one more. There are some pieces of evidence that suggest that Eagle Dynamics isn't always the best at receiving negative feedback, but that's something they probably need to work on a little bit. And what I'm saying here is that basically like there's some stuff that just kind of needs to be dealt with, and I think they're trying to deal with it. So let's just try to stay cool and remember what we've got and remember how cool it is, and that would be good for everybody if we would do that. Like it's in all of our best interests for Eagle Dynamics to succeed, and that requires feedback, and that requires us being a community. So that's what I'm kind of rooting for here. But the underlying systems that make this work and make it fail correctly as well as succeed correctly are actually pretty cool, and it's a lot of extra code and extra complexity to this game that a lot of games don't necessarily have to have, or at least not to the degree that DCS has to have it. So anyway, I hope I hope it makes sense, and I hope that everybody kind of like learned something if you haven't thought about that before. I hope that it gives you a new light. Um, Enlightenment into like what DCS is and what it offers and how it's made. And if you have thought about it before, give me your thoughts on it. Like, is there more to it than what I'm saying? Am I making it overly complicated and cool? Or what's going on there? So anyway, thanks for watching. Happy flying. Take care.